All right. It is, 6:03. I think we'll get started in the interest of time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Welcome to the Metro Green Line Extension's 2022 Minneapolis Town Hall. This is in our series of city town halls that we're having this spring in advance of the 2022 construction season. My name is David Davies. I'm the outreach coordinator that covers the Minneapolis segment for the project. And with me tonight, we have a few of my colleagues, including project director Jim Alexander and one of our construction managers, Andy Collum, as well as a couple of my outreach colleagues, James Makoviak and Nikongo Sigolo. You might see us kind of moving things around and kind of referencing to each other to get some questions answered, things like that throughout the night. But we're here tonight to talk about primarily about the construction season for 2022. We'll make a presentation. I'll make a presentation about the just giving a general project update, and then we can quickly review highlights from 2021 and move into the 2022 activities that we anticipate to occur this year. We want to leave time for question and answer as well, of course. What I'm going to do is I'm going to review just a couple logistics here first. One is that this meeting is being recorded, so just wanted to make everybody aware of that. Two, if we are, as we have Q&A, a lot of folks have done this in the past. Please feel free to put your any questions that you have in the chat if you can. We'll also leave some room for folks who are on the phone to chime in. If you are able to, I'm not going to worry too much about explaining it. We'll figure it out as we go in terms of raising your hand, but there is a function to raise your hand in the participant list. So if you do want to raise your hand, that helps us know that you have a question when the time comes. And what I'm hoping to do is get this presentation mostly done in 30 to 40 minutes, which allows us for 20, 25 minutes for Q&A. I am going to take a couple questions after the project update that are in chat, like a couple chat questions. So if you have questions during the first part of the presentation in chat, I'll pause there to answer a couple questions there and then move on to kind of the construction related topics. That's all I have right now. So why don't we get into it? That's kind of our topics for tonight. I gave you kind of most of that just now. So as we are, as we're recording this and making this presentation available for everybody, we always, a lot of folks here like to know a lot about this project already, have a lot of history with this project, but we always want to make this information available to those that might just be joining or moving into the area or watching this presentation later who haven't engaged as much. As you have probably also noted, we have pivoted from talking about this project in terms of being the Southwest Light Rail line to the Metro Green Line extension. That is certainly very intentional because we want people to start to really directly associate this as something that will be connected to the larger Metro transit system, and especially the existing Metro Green Line, which serves downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul. So as folks are aware, this is a new LRT extension that's almost 15 miles, 16 new stations, and has connections to downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul, and also connections to the Metro Blue Line, servicing the VA hospital, the Mall of America, and the airport. As part of our construction project, this is kind of the scope that we always like to share. Not only are we building those new stations, but we have a number of new structures, bridges, pedestrian tunnels, and of course, people are very familiar here with the Kenilworth LRT tunnel, as well as the Trunk Highway 62 LRT tunnel that's being constructed in the west side of the project. We have a number of places where LRT crosses at grade. Those are the LRT grade crossings. And we have over 125 retaining walls. So a lot of a lot of structural work being done, civil work being done as part of this project. So we'll get right into the project update. A lot of folks have seen this slide before. We just always want to set the table with what we have completed up to this date. We have the majority of utilities complete. Of course, like a lot of the site prep, demolition, work zone establishment, that's mostly done at the beginning of the project. And we are right in the thick of the civil construction, which is the construction of structures, track stations, some of the elements that we've just that I just touched on in the slides before. As we move forward, we're going to continue with civil construction. We'll talk about that schedule in just a couple moments. But we have already started to initiate the other main portion of this work, or one of the other main portions, which is the systems work, which is where we run the electrical and construct the overhead catenary system, our communication system, things like that. And then, of course, prior to opening, we will be conducting testing of the line before people, we have passengers on it. So, as we're speaking to the Minneapolis community tonight, we know that the community is very familiar with a couple of the main challenges faced by the project, but just wanted to run through them tonight. These are challenges that were either relatively unforeseen, or we knew about them but needed to work through them in a specific manner and order. That includes the corridor protection wall up near Bryn, Mawr and into downtown Minneapolis that was added by change order, even after the project started construction. That certainly has added some significant time to the construction schedule, specifically that schedule in Minneapolis. We'll probably talk a little bit more about the sea camp pile retaining wall adjacent to the Cedar Isles condos. That was due to unforeseen soil conditions, right? The settlement that had occurred, and out of an abundance of caution, we pivoted away from the initial sheet piling method that was incorporated in the project to this different and more conservative method of retaining soil so that the tunnel could eventually be excavated. That's another major complex change that had to be overcome and has caused delay. And then the incorporation of the Eden Prairie Town Center Station, of course, is also was added to the construction contract by change order after later on in the process. We've laid this out in a couple meetings before, but we came out in January with information about a revised schedule and anticipated revised cost. We wanted to step through that with folks briefly tonight. We've been doing this in a number of different meetings. We want people to get a really good understanding of what goes into this the revision of the Southwest Light Rail schedule. So what you're seeing here is we've got the original civil construction schedule and cost, but now due primarily to those changes that we just kind of went through, we've got a new scope, right? And a new civil construction needs that need to be addressed. Those needs are being addressed through an agreement with London McCrossin Joint Venture, our civil construction contractor, and the resulting change orders that will be processed, which will result, unfortunately, in an additional 34 months of anticipated civil construction. So what you're seeing there, the take-home message here is we've got our original schedule, we've got the new changes to the changes to the project, which add on this this time that's needed to construct those changes and deal with those changes, and that gives us the revised civil construction schedule and eventually the cost. So zooming back out one level, right? We've got right now, we are working towards the finalization of that agreement with London McCrossin, with LMJV, and you see that arrow that points to the revised civil construction schedule and cost. Now that's just one element of revising the entire project schedule and cost, right? We've got the civil construction that we've got pretty much getting clarity on. The next step is then to undertake a similar process, which has already been started. It's not like we have to wait completely for the civil agreement to be signed in order to start systems. This process has already begun, but it's something that needs to also be done in order to then progress on to revising all the other supporting contracts, and also provide time for that testing that we talked about a couple minutes ago, to arrive finally at a final revised project opening day and cost, right? So we are still where that arrow is. We've got these other steps to take. A lot of people want to know what are the details behind, this delay in this work, this added time and the cost. We're still figuring some of that out, right? There's still clarity to be had there, but we've been working at it for over a year now with the civil construction agreement, and we're working diligently. Our staff is working diligently to finalize and get clarity on these other pieces so that we can bring forward that revised opening day and cost. However, we can, even though we have to step through those pieces, we still can estimate, and that's what's been kind of reported thus far, an anticipated opening day, which is 2027. We also anticipate that civil construction will be complete around in that 2025 timeframe. Now, people also want to know that exact number for estimated project cost. There's the estimated project cost, that 2.65 to 2.75 billion. More clarity will be given as we step through those other pieces, right? The system schedule and the other supporting contracts. But this is what we want to bring forward to the community so that you are aware of that. And of course, all of our funders and our stakeholders that work with us, that this is where we're at today. This slide basically, it's always been contentious about what's in, what's out of the project. As these challenges as we face these challenges, we've gotten questions from the community about, what needs to be done to get to that project budget. We're really proud of the fact that we're 60% complete, right? Even though these challenges that we face, largely you see them front and center in Minneapolis, we see a lot of progress overall, right? Especially on that west half of the project. And what we want to make sure people are aware of is that with 60% done, we're not going to be cutting elements out of this, significant elements out of this project. We're on track to, build the project as planned, including these changes that are necessary. Acknowledging that additional funding will be needed, right? And that's something that certainly our staff and the project partners are going to be working on over the coming months as the final number becomes more clear. A lot of the outreach staff and project partners have had conversations about, these costs, right? And community members have expressed frustration about rising costs to the project. This slide is not meant to be provocative. It really is meant to just say that we do see in other peer projects, right, very complex projects such as Southwest LRT, we do see projects that are around this similar, even factoring in the changes for the project and these increased costs. We still see that this project is competitive, is comparable to other projects around the country where similar complexities are faced. So just giving you kind of a little bit of comparison here from what was the original kind of project budget of 152 million per mile, right? That's being revised upward, but we also see peer projects that are still in that 200 to 500 million range. Certainly, there are other projects that are less. You can find projects that are less, but we do want to just acknowledge that we still remain comparable, right, in a lot of compared to projects across the country, especially given the complexities of some of these that have a lot of bridges or tunnels those very complex features that we are dealing with. We always like to remind people too, like, even though the project is delayed, we've still seen a lot of investment already in this corridor, and we're going to continue to see investment, which is a really positive thing. So these are just a few examples, but it's exciting to see people already, these entities already being active, and the corridor already starting to activate and be ready for our opening day. Of course, we always like to report on and have people aware of the disadvantaged business enterprise and those goals that we have set. Just want to make people aware of those tonight, that we are currently achieving a lot of those goals when it comes to or getting close to achieving those goals when it comes to the disadvantaged business enterprises here that are associated with the project. And finally, in terms of this is kind of our last couple slides here for project update, and then we'll take a couple questions. But it's important to always remember that the people who are working on this, and we're not talking necessarily about council staff, but there are a lot of folks here that are continuously employed as this work progresses. So there's a lot of pride in that amongst the people who are involved here, and we always like to make sure that people are aware of the folks continuing to bring home paychecks here as we're progressing with construction. This slide basically says that, but just gives you a little bit more meat on those bones in terms of just how much number of paychecks and how much money is being brought home by people who are affiliated with the project. So I will pause there. I'm going to pivot to the chat and just see if there's anybody here, anybody that's given any chat questions here. And Anita asked who will be funding. We got a question about who will be funding the total price tag. That's certainly something that that all the project partners are going to be figuring out in the coming months here. That's sort of that acknowledgement that there is a funding gap, but everybody's working hard to figure out what to do there, especially as we move forward and have clarity with the exact tag, as once that becomes clear. And Anita, I think I see your hand up.
Yes, just for clarification, because you said on one of your charts that it wasn't going to be the city that was going to take on that price tag. So I just would be interested in knowing, if it's not the city residents or taxpayers, then who would it be? Not that you have a total answer, but like who else is at the table that you're even considering? Thank you.
Say, David, this is Jim. Maybe I could speak to that.
Sure, Jim. Thanks.
All right. So in terms of the funding, the council actually just had a business item with this transportation committee and the management committee last week to advance $80.6 million to the project. That comes from monies from the council via the federal government, and also we have grant money left with Hennepin County to add to that total. We continue to have conversations with our primary funding partners, Hennepin County and FTA, and also talking with the governor's office to fill that gap. And we don't have that resolved yet, but we look to have that resolved here fairly soon.
Okay, thank you, Jim. I think, though, that I would say that your PowerPoint slide is misleading, because it is going to be the taxpayers that are paying for it. If you say the Met Council, we're funding you folks, Hennepin County's funding, I mean, we're all funding, so, and the city's funding. So I just, maybe I'd have you, I just think that if I read your PowerPoint correctly, it was just saying like there was going to be some new sources.
Right.
And
yeah, Anita, point noted. We've been using the same presentation when we're giving updates to city councils, and it was really intended that we weren't going to go to the city officials for money. You're correct that if we're looking for Hennepin County, it would obviously, or even FDA, would obviously affect citizens within Minneapolis. We weren't trying to be slight there, just.
Thanks, Jim. Got a question here about bike trails. I'm going to go through the construction updates first, but we can definitely talk bike trails before this meeting is over. And then let's see. And then a question just about more of a comment about finishing the lines, moving out, kind of the staging of the construction. And Jim, maybe this speaks to, before we move on to construction, just like how we've got a significant chunk of work done out west. And I've gotten a few questions about, like, how is the work, how is the contractor, or how do we kind of perceive the contractor to be structuring this, you know, the rest of the work as part of the civil scope, right?
Sure.
People are always curious, like, well, what's coming up next, right, in terms of areas of focus?
Well, if you look at the overall project, there is quite a bit done out on the west end. We're roughly 62% done on the civil construction. Minneapolis obviously isn't that quite far along. There are places in Eden Prairie that are quite far along. We have a number of bridges that have been finished out. And we're actually looking to hand off some of those work areas to our systems contractor later this year. And we'll continue to do that in 23 and 24. We're really approaching things from both ends of the project, from west to east up to the tunnel, and from east to west going up to the tunnel on the other end. The tunnel is obviously going to be the long lead item on this project. So we're looking to try to get things completed on other parts, so we could get the systems contractor out there to do their work, get that finished. Ultimately, we have a vision of doing some testing, actually running some trains on both of those segments outside of the tunnel, so we can be more prepared and ready to go once the tunnel is completed to be able to test out the whole system.
Great. We'll probably get into that a little more as we go along here. One more quick one, a follow up from as well. Just what the largest cost drivers from original project budget, and this question's referencing a long time ago, like 1 billion, to now the anticipated 2.6, 2.7 billion. I mean, there are a number of those cost drivers we've covered tonight, Jim, right? But it's, you know, some of these changes are pretty significant.
Yeah, I would sum it up. Working next to freight rail and the Kenilworth Tunnel are the primary cost drivers.
Great. Certainly we'll have more time for Q&A. I'm going to start to move through some of these this construction recap, and then into what we anticipate to occur this year, and we'll get back to some questions near the end there, folks. All right. So as we've talked about, 60% complete of civil construction. We have a lot that's currently under construction, right? The tunnels, both PED and the LRT tunnels are certainly underway. Most of the retaining walls are completed, which is a good feeling there, and a large majority of the private and public utilities are also completed. As we've talked about a couple times before, we've got the systems contractor has already mobilized, and so you'll start to see a lot of their work over on the west end. I think I left it in the today's topics, and that was a typo. We won't see as much systems work in Minneapolis this year, but you will certainly start to see some of that work occurring as civil elements finish up in certain areas. And then, you know, notably, we've had almost, you know, all of our light rail vehicles that are commissioned as part of the project delivered. And some of that, and those are kind of hand in hand, stored and starting to be tested and eventually put into service using the Franklin Operations and Maintenance Facility that is along the blue line, where we have also built modifications to accommodate some of that. So this is just kind of our general slide. We have a vast majority of our stations underway. Certain stations you've seen are in much more advanced stages of completion. Up in that top right corner, you see the West 21st Street station, which really looks, you know, almost as complete as some of the others along the line. It's pretty remarkable to see. You know, you don't have to squint anymore to see like what that really looks like, which is really cool. There are a number of other stations in similar stages of completion along the line. And then, of course, what you're going to see this year is, and we'll get into this a little bit, is work on some of those other stations coming up. Let's see. Of course, wanted to note that in 2021, a lot of progress was actually made on the Kenilworth Tunnel, and it's pretty neat. We love this picture just because it does kind of see. This is one of those where you start to squint. You really do see like the finished conditions, right? The two portals through which LRT is going to be traveling in the tunnel. Of course, that's going to be covered. You wouldn't see it exactly like this in this spot, but it's neat to see that perspective of construction. One notable element that we've put a little bit of time into talking about tonight is the corridor protection barrier in Bryn, and you know, it's notable that the contractor has really been able to be successful in moving this construction forward. If you're traveling along the Cedar Lake Trail in that area, you see some significant process in the drilled shafts and the rebar that was erected. And eventually now they've been pouring concrete panels for much of the past, 6 to 8 months, to see some real significant progress there. So that's encouraging news over in the Bryn Mawr and kind of Bassett Creek Valley area. Just wanted to note one other area here. You know, we'll talk about Glenwood in a little bit here, but the bridge structure kind of coming out of the Royalston Avenue Farmers Market Station has seen some notable advancement, even more so. This was, I think, last fall, but they're continuing to work here on the structure that ties into the target field station. So pretty neat to see that level of completion on that structure closer to downtown Minneapolis. So just briefly wanted to cover some of the notable activities and things that you're going to be seeing this year in Minneapolis. Move my camera here so I can see my other monitor here. So of course we have secant wall construction, which is currently paused, but we see tunnel construction, overall construction of the tunnel that includes excavation, that includes secant wall construction, that includes actual, you know, forming and pouring of the tunnel structure itself down in the excavation area. We see that all progressing, continuing to progress this year through 2022. We had a meeting earlier this year about the closure of Cedar Lake Parkway, and at the time, we certainly thought it was going to be closing earlier than it has. It has not closed yet, but we still anticipate about a 10-month closure. Right now, as of say last Friday, when we put out our newest construction update, which please sign up for our construction update that comes out. We think it's going to be probably more in that April timeframe to close down the Parkway. But once that's done, we'll be constructing, you know, excavating and constructing the tunnel through that area. You'll also see coming this fall, summer and fall, more activity at the Kenilworth Channel area. You'll see the anticipated demolition and construction of the third bridge in that area. So we have the freight bridge, which is complete, the LRT bridge, which we anticipate being in an advanced state of completion this year. And then the third bridge, which is the trail bridge, will start likely to start construction this summer. And then we'll also be working on the historic WP Works Progress Administration wall that lines the corridor. Notably, that's just to the, if you will, east or south of, kind of away from Cedar Lake, excuse me, from where the park board has done their shoreline revitalization work this past winter. So generally speaking, you're looking at advancing the station work at both West Lake Street Station and West 21st Street Station, continuing the Kenilworth Tunnel work, continuing the LRT bridge at the Cedar Lake Channel, and starting that work on the pedestrian or trail Trail Bridge and activating that site for the WPA wall construction. Notably, as we talked about, is the long-term closure of Cedar Lake Parkway, which we will continue to provide updates on and make sure the community is aware of prior to the closing. That just kind of gives you, I'll use this opportunity, if you haven't seen our video for kind of how we construct the tunnel and certainly how this will be phased through Cedar Lake Parkway, I just posted a link into the chat. This kind of comes from out of our meeting that we had in January about the closure. I encourage you to watch that and kind of, it gives a little bit more perspective on what's going on in terms of tunnel construction and the closure of the Parkway, why we need so much time. All right, moving on. So we've got kind of moving up into that Bryn Mawr and Bassett Creek Valley and downtown Minneapolis area. So overall, what you're seeing is advancing the 3 stations in this area, right, at Bryn Mawr, at Bassett Creek Valley, at Royalston Avenue Farmers Market. Down at Bryn Mawr, you're going to see continuing work to construct the pedestrian bridge there that connects the intersection of Wayzata and Penn, comes out to connect to the actual station itself. That's kind of out in the trail and rail corridor area. We do anticipate that there could be some traffic impacts at Wayzata and Penn for some of that station construction. That's certainly been a relatively quiet area, and our Bryn Mawr community members have been certainly curious about when that's going to take place. We'll want to be in touch with them as there's more clarity regarding that schedule. Corridor protection wall continues, certainly, as we've talked about. And then, notably kind of moving up into the Royalston area, one thing that we haven't done a lot of actually in Minneapolis that we've done a lot of in the west part is actual just road work. A lot of our work is in the rail corridor. We've certainly had roadway impacts or very targeted roadway work, and we will continue to have some of that. But there's going to be some pretty significant road work along Border Avenue and Holden Street, right, kind of next to the Minneapolis Farmers Market. This is part of the project. It's a full roadway reconstruction, sidewalk to sidewalk, and we're certainly coordinating with the businesses there to make sure that we can, keep access and try to move through that area as efficiently as possible. So just to recap, stations are certainly going to be active sites this year. Corridor protection wall, you'll continue to see a lot of activity there. Glenwood Bridge is certainly something where we've experienced some challenges. As we've talked about in the past, it's always challenging constructing this type of complex structure. Remember, it's three specific structures. They kind of tie into each other, kind of 2 parts of a roadway bridge plus the LRT structure, and it's all next to the active freight rail. But we've certainly, we are progressing with that work. As you see in the top right corner there, the photo from this past winter of the LRT bridge component of that structure. Glenwood Bridge we do anticipate that it's going to be closed for most of this year. We're looking to see how this work progresses to see what a reopening schedule would look like, but a lot of that will depend on kind of the progress that we can make through the main construction season. So there will certainly be updates on that front later this year. And then you'll see, as I showed earlier, the image of the 5th and 7th Street LRT bridge that ties into Target Field. A lot of work on that area around the Herc incinerator as that structure gets closer to completion. Traffic impacts, we've kind of summarized this, but Border and Holden certainly going to be active for most of this construction season. 5th Avenue and 7th Street around in that Target Field area is going to see some impacts probably as we're setting beams or constructing overhead. And then something for the Bryn Mawr folks, the Wayzata and Penn area for that roadway reconstruction near the station. Just a couple notes on the group that that I am a part of on the project office, the communications and outreach team, we were certainly, even though construction events were fewer, right? We still had a very busy construction season last year and took a lot of calls, answered a lot of emails, still had a lot of meetings, both on-site and virtual, connecting with the community. Here's my information. I think a lot of folks at this point on this call would probably have my information, but I certainly encourage you to reach out if you continue to have questions, are curious about any part of the construction. We are going to, especially as COVID kind of seems to be a little bit less in its severity, this coming summer, we'd really like to get back out there and do more of the tours of getting people up close and personal to some of these construction elements, let people see firsthand what's going on out there. They're really great opportunities. We'll be advertising those opportunities as they come up. But one thing I just wanted to note as I kind of click here is in terms of what we want to do this year. In Minneapolis, I feel lucky that I get to connect on a few different levels, right? We've got these big plenary meetings where we get to talk to an entire community all at once. I get to go to, monthly or every other month to some of the neighborhood, to the Cedar Isles Dean neighborhood and to the Kenwood neighborhood, sometimes to the West Makaska neighborhood to present there. And I also communicate with people on an even more granular level, right? Sometimes it's apartments or condo associations, sometimes it's block leaders. And so I really encourage folks, it's kind of my last pitch here, to, as you have interest among your smaller groups, more targeted groups, if you have interest in what's going on and you'd like to gather together to talk more about that, right, on a targeted level, I already foresee a few follow-ups to even this meeting, right, with some of the neighborhoods to talk about specific elements. But I'd really like to connect with you to have more intimate and targeted conversations about how this work continues to be, influential, present in your communities over the next couple of years, right? Because we do have a couple more years to go as we advance civil construction, and we're still here. We still want to be present and responsive and reaching out to folks to get through this together. Those are the slides. It's a lot of information to take in 40 minutes. But I understand, we've got we'll kind of transition to question and answer here. I'm going to be looking at the chat. I'll be asking my colleagues to kind of pipe up if they see something here, any questions that I'm missing. But I'm going to kind of start with some of the chat questions here, get through a few of those, and then I'll be looking to see if there are any raised hands or other folks maybe on the phone in a few minutes to take questions as well. So I'm going to be coming back up here. And Jim and Andy are going to be helping me out here with some of these questions as well. So first off, when you discovered that the original plan for tunnel wouldn't work, what were the considerations if there were any, putting the light rail at grade? And of course, Jim, I think it's not that the tunnel isn't working, right? We had to adjust a very specific method of supportive excavation, not the actual structure of the tunnel itself, right?
Sure, and I'm not sure if we aren't planning on going at grade. If that were the case, we would have to alter the plan, and it obviously doesn't fit with freight rail and the trail going through there. And I think going back to preliminary engineering, when we first looked at this, we did have some concepts and landed on the tunnel. If we had to have everything at grade, we'd have to take homes, and that wasn't an option for this part of the work. And so we didn't take that path.
Right, and yeah, I do want to clarify that if someone is saying that the plan for the tunnel, when we moved from the sheet piling to the secant wall, that is a very specific element of the construction of the tunnel, not the actual tunnel like the tunnel itself. Next question going down, estimating what the tunnel will end up costing. Jim, we're probably not able to do that at this time, right?
Yeah, we don't have that. The civil construction contract was mostly a lump sum that included the tunnel, and we don't have that specific cost. So we are not able to identify the actual cost the contractor has in that.
Could I follow up on that, please? This is Jeanette.
Sure, Jeanette.
Thanks. I'm sorry to press you on this, Jim and Dave, but it feels like you should maybe know that and maybe know whether it's worth considering looking at other options for the tunnel. Because if it ends up costing $1 billion, does that really make sense for the taxpayers?
Well, as I said, Jeanette, we don't have pinpoint cost on that tunnel. It's part of a overall lump sum for the contract. The overall contract for civil is $800 million, and we don't know what that actual cost is for the tunnel. It's just because it was part of the lump sum.
Well, I appreciate that, Jim, and I'm sorry, I'm not a construction person, but I would want to know if I were building an addition on my house, how much does it cost to do the various elements of that so that I could manage it? So anyway, it's your project.
Thanks, Jeanette. Going down the chat here, just asking about the soil problems in Kenilworth and kind of how those were discovered. Jim, I can kick it off that we've kind of talked about this at previous meetings and communicated this a bit before about the settlement. We undertook pretty significant analysis of soil conditions during engineering and project design, right? And because we were seeing something specific cases of settlement, let's say in the sheet piling, that's kind of a very specific case of an unforeseen condition compared to not knowing the general composition of soil.
Sure. Well, David, we undertook a pretty extensive soil exploration program by our consulting engineers that helped us on this effort. And we also invited in the manufacturer of the press-in piler that was used to put in the sheeting. And we shared that information with them, and our engineer said, the supplier, the manufacturer of the equipment said that we should be able to get these sheets in without any issues. So we relied on our consulting engineer to their advice on this. And unfortunately, we ran into some issues, and we had to auger as we put the sheets in. Essentially, it's a drill in front of the ahead of the sheet as they're getting inserted into the ground. And that caused some settlement, and that's where we went to the secant pile option next to the Sika buildings.
Question I've gotten, I think we've kind of talked about this at one of the previous recent meetings. We have the corridor protection barrier in Bryn Mawr, and certainly that was done primarily because of in realized through our negotiations with Burlington Northern. So the question is, why have a barrier there and not in the Kenilworth corridor? Still as part of the, and probably, that question could be asked, in some of the other shared parts of the corridor as well.
Well, as part of our design criteria that we set up before we started this project, we had said that we'll need a crash wall when we're within 25 feet of freight rail, that LRT track, the closest track. And so that was what our assumption was going into this. And on the BNSF corridor, we had a crash wall that extended for a short duration around just under 94 there. As BNSF got into this and their attorneys got involved, we came to an agreement, and that agreement included adding about a mile, more than a mile of corridor protection along their alignment. And that was the condition they put on us and for us to be able to be on their property.
Yeah, and just to,
So maybe I could add, there is a short crash protection wall on the either end of the tunnel in the Kenilworth corridor, but that's again where we're within that 25 feet.
Yeah, if
Right.
I could follow up on that.
go ahead, Larry.
Just to be clear, north of the tunnel, going through the corridor, the freight rail is now within 25 feet of the light rail tracks.
Well, there's a short section where it applies for design criteria, just as you're coming out of the portals.
All right, I understand that, but past that wall that you've already mentioned, there is no further. You're not at any. You don't come within 25 feet of the light rail tracks with the freight rail.
Yeah,
North of
it's 25 or greater. Yes.
Thanks.
And Larry, just to clarify there, it's center line of freight to center line of LRT.
Yeah, I understand that. Thanks.
Yep. All right. This one we've got, I think, in some of the other town halls, and I know it's kind of an open question at this point. What's being done to protect the stations from vandalism damage as we kind of finish up some of these elements, which is good. We see some things finishing up. What are we doing to kind of keep those things as nice as possible until opening day?
Sure, I can take that one again, David. So we are looking at that as we, right now with the civil contractor, they essentially own the site, if you will. They are responsible for the safety and security of the construction site. That'll eventually be handed off to our systems contractor, Aldrich Parsons joint venture, and they'll own the site until they get their work done. At some point, Metro Transit will take ownership. And we've been looking at that in terms of how can we protect these assets as we're going to be waiting for revenue service to happen. We'll start testing eventually, but we are taking a look to see how we can particularly protect the stations along the whole line, not just in Minneapolis. So this is something we're investigating on Central Corridor. We had a period where we weren't ready for revenue service, and some of the stations were done, and we had ownership where we put chain link fence around the stations just to protect them that way. And that is one of the tools we may use here. We're also going to seek out some other properties that have run into this issue for maybe a more extended period of time that we're facing here to see what kind of solutions they've done as well.
Great. I'm going to pivot back to an earlier question. One more question from the chat, and then I'm going to just see if there is anyone on the phone or maybe on video who may not be able to enter things into chat that has any questions. But there was an earlier question about trails, and so I know that we get a lot of questions about the state of the trails along the entire project, right? Not just in Minneapolis. We have and when these are going to open. So we've got a pretty active bike community, trail user community, and especially folks maybe starting to return to work more in downtown Minneapolis and regaining some of that commuting routine. I know, just to kick it off there, that we will continue to evaluate opportunities as they come up for being able to reopen segments of trails. So we've got, we're starting small. We've got a small segment reopening in Hopkins this coming spring. And we're going to continue to, the take-home message here is that we don't have to complete all of civil construction in order to reopen all the bike trails. Some of those will hopefully be reopened, especially kind of in St. Louis Park and Hopkins, in a sooner time frame, a more immediate time frame. And then there will be areas that are not going to open until closer to the end of that civil construction, namely the Kenilworth Trail, right? Because the Kenilworth Trail sits in its final condition on top of the LRT tunnel. And so LRT tunnel being, as Jim said, one of the longest lead items, we don't expect to have the Kenilworth Trail back in operation there until certainly closer to the end of civil construction. I know a lot of folks are continue to be frustrated with the lack of the closure of the North Cedar Lake Trail or Cedar Lake Trail segment between Van White Boulevard or Dunwoody, if you will, and Royalston Avenue into downtown Minneapolis. That segment is very much contingent on the completion of the Glenwood Bridge that's above that area. Unfortunately, there aren't really any places between Van White and the bridge construction area to get on or off. So that, Van White is kind of the place that it needs to be closed to eliminate people from going into that area. And we're certainly going to continue to monitor that area closely. We want to see the bridge back open and the trail back open, but we've got to do it safely. We've got to allow the contractor working room in that area. It's a really tight space still with active freight rail. So the conditions have to be right, not only above, right, with the Glenwood Avenue Bridge, but at the grade of the trail itself as construction activities progress for the trail to reopen. But we certainly want to get those segments, open as soon as we are able, as soon as it's safe, as soon as the contractor has concluded their activities in a way that we can get those facilities back open. Jim, anything to add on trails?
No, I think you covered it, David.
All righty. Let's see. I think what I said I'd do is kind of look for anyone who is not entering into chat but may have question. I do not see any hands up. So for a couple moments, I will open it up. It's kind of, I don't want it to be a free-for-all, but if you want to unmute and ask a question, just you can signal and we'll try to accommodate that as best we can.
Tim Donahue, is the floor open?
Yeah, Tim, you're the one with the trails question. Yep.
That is correct. I would just like to encourage you for the hazards of being detoured into downtown Minneapolis on Hennepin. And I think a lot of your photos of the progress that has happened shows just how much room is in that area. And I disagree. I would rather see the construction tighten their stuff up a little bit and get us 8 feet so that we're not being pushed out into some of the heaviest traffic in the city. Which I think that's just the point being is that is a significant hazard. I would hope is being considered.
Yeah, Tim, I appreciate that, and I've talked a lot with users such as yourself, frequent users. Sounds like somewhat like I would call like a high confidence biker who is still frustrated at having to go into downtown on Hennepin. We've certainly worked with the city to try to find as best a way possible through this closure to navigate this as best we can. I know that folks use different routes to get into downtown. We need to have a route that is, even though there is heavy traffic, we need to have a route that's reliable for even lower confidence bikers, easy to understand, and for the detour, right? From a signage perspective and turning movements, things like that. We also, earlier on at the beginning of construction, I think we had people going through Loring Park. We adjusted that, even though it did move people onto Hennepin, it also made for a more straightforward route. We added the delineators kind of along Dunwoody to try to make that a more accessible environment, right? Coming off of the closure area. We do continue to evaluate trail detours, so certainly, Tim, I'd love to follow up with you too if you have like a specific suggestion along that route. We can certainly take a look there. But unfortunately, we're just not going to be able to give the trail back under Glenwood in that pinch point until we've got a lot more construction there. You're on mute. You're on mute, buddy. Still on mute.
Excuse me. I said I'd be happy to follow up with you. I've got your email, and yes, I would appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you. We've got a couple minutes before 7. I do want to acknowledge people's time, but I'm going to try to hit a couple more questions and probably stay just like, a few minutes extra for those that can stay on for a few extra minutes, just to make sure we've got a couple of these questions answered. But certainly acknowledging that if folks have to leave exactly at 7, you got to leave. Wanted to address a very specific question actually up in that area, that downtown area near Target Field Station. We've got some pile driving going on for the bridge that I talked about earlier. Just curious about the timeline of that. Andy, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I know I haven't engaged you much yet this meeting, but my understanding is we're actually kind of nearing completion of the significant pile driving up near the Herc and Target Field Station for that bridge. I believe we've got kind of a spring time frame to complete pile driving that area. Is that correct?
Yeah, David, you've got that correct. We should be finished with the bridge piling shortly. I'm not sure if it's this week necessarily, but in the next coming weeks, I think we should be finished up there. We do have a couple of other elements in there that are pile supported as well, though, so it won't be the absolute end, but that particular structure there should be finishing up shortly.
Right. Thanks. We've got a question about the City Lakes townhomes. I know I've connected with representatives there, both through the neighborhood board and just otherwise on this topic. It's certainly they've been vocal about this. Having access to the bike trail, and what I would assume that question is about is direct at-grade access across the freight rail to the bike trail and probably the station. That access will not be available. It actually currently really hasn't ever been available in that you're crossing an active freight rail line, but we're certainly not creating a crossing at that area. The safe way to get from let's call it the west side of the Lake Street Bridge to the east side where the station area is, and is to cross the West Lake Street Bridge. There will be what we call vertical circulation or stair and elevator towels at the top of the Lake Street Bridge on both sides. So you'll be able, if you can get up to the top of the Lake Street Bridge, then you drop down onto the station platform, and you won't need to. If you're a trail user, you can use that vertical circulation tower simply to just exit the platform and access the trail instead of riding the light rail. So that kind of functions as a de facto trail connection as well, instead of going all the way around to Chowan Avenue.
There be any improvements to the Lake Street Bridge where people have to walk? Because right now all the traffic is too fast, it's too loud, it's too stinky. And, to walk your dog up there, it's frightening.
Right.
And I, for one, I only moved here to have access to the shops and the lake and the bike trail. And now I'm just completely cut up.
Yeah, Lisa, good question. We can't do anything for you on the stinky part, other than bring bus rapid transit, which hopefully reduces the number of cars overall, which will be a connection there. But in terms of the actual construction, the improvement to the West Lake Street Bridge, there is going to be a barrier constructed between cars and pedestrians, so that there is a protective barrier there. That's the entire length of the bridge, not just where the vertical circulation towers are. So once you are on the bridge, there will be, I think it's like a 3.5 foot or maybe 3.5 foot with a railing, concrete barrier between walkers and cars.
Excellent.
Yep. I'm certainly not going to get to all of these right now in the next few minutes. And I encourage folks to follow up with me individually for some of these questions. We can actually also kind of, as the meeting is being recorded, we can get these and follow up with folks, get these questions and follow up with folks individually or with some of the neighborhoods too that I know folks are affiliated with. I see a few questions just about timing, like of construction activities. Jeanette, you got another one in here about the dirt pile near 21st Street. Certainly, that's something that's probably going to be there for the foreseeable future. It's an area where we're staging a lot of equipment and materials. You're going to continue to see excavation activities. In fact, those will be ramping up again quite soon in the near future as excavation restarts around the Cedar Lake Parkway area, and you're going to see that those dirt piles continue to be there as the dirt is staged in that area around the Burnham Bridge before being hauled off and used in other places. Let's see. Trying to go back through and just see. Anita had another one about providing contractors and third-party vendors of the project. Jim, maybe I can call on you a little bit. I mean, we've certainly talked a lot about our prime contractors here, the systems and civil construction contractors. I'm not sure. I can't tell.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a listing of we have two prime contractors on the main line, the London McCrossan for civil and Aldridge Parsons for systems. They have a number of subcontractors, into the almost probably in the hundred some with all told all together. And I don't know if you're interested in consultants as well. I'm not sure what you mean by third party. But we have AECOM, that's our engineer of record, and we have Bryn Intertech, that is our quality management consultant, and both of those contracts have a number of sub consultants on them as well. We have Kimley Horn that's helping us with construction management, so a number of entities are involved. Maybe Anita left. I'm not sure if she's still on.
I'm not sure. With just a couple more minutes, I'm going to open it back up just for a couple more questions from folks who may not have been able to use the chat. If there's anyone who hasn't yet been able to provide a question or comment, you're welcome to unmute right now. We'll try to order that accordingly. Alrighty, I'm not hearing anybody, so if you're talking, I'll give you one more chance in terms of being able to hit that mute button or turn that mute button off.
I'd like to know, my name is Judy. I'd like to know who the contractor is that's monitoring the vibrations near the secant wall construction.
Yeah, that's a subcontractor called Terracon that's subcontracted to London McCrossan, the civil contractor.
Judy, does that make sense?
Yeah, I'd just like to know who's accountable for that, because we have serious questions about, at least in the past, the monitoring not operating dependably at critical times.
Yeah, I hear that. We are looking into that. We've actually hired a specialty forensic engineer that is looking both at the SECA issues along with the monitoring. And we've asked them to take a look at that to come up with some recommendations if they see any that are needed to be implemented as we move forward.
Yes, I'm aware of the contract with the structural engineer. But this is serious business for people who live in the buildings that are impacted by the vibrations.
Understand that, and that's why we're taking a hard look at this to see if there's any modifications we need to do.
Thanks, Judy. I appreciate that. All righty, I'm going to give one more call for anybody that's wanting to step off mute and provide a. Jeremy.
Yes, Jeanette had asked this in chat. What's the status of the park board permitting and the length of the Cedar Lake Parkway closure? Do you have any updates on that?
Yeah, David, maybe I can take that. So we have a permit right now to close the Parkway through, I think it's through July, if I'm not mistaken, Andy. And so we will need to seek a further permit extension from the park board to continue that. Jeremy, right now we're trying to get back up and running on the on tunnel. We had that sheet issue that is now down in place, and we're working with the railroad on some monitoring issues, and we hope to get that underway. We're still looking to get that work done yet this year. But it's going to go into the late late fall here.
Alrighty, folks. I will just reiterate that you have my contact information via this presentation, and I'm going to put real time here. That's my work cell as well for non-urgent questions. This is more kind of like follow-up questions, just curiosities, communications, opportunities to get in front of other people or targeted, community members to further the conversations. Certainly, if there's any sort of urgent concerns, we have I think on one of our outreach slides, we have the construction hotline, 612-373-3933. That's plastered everywhere across the corridor. We certainly want people to utilize that if they're conveying urgent concerns, but you are always welcome to reach out to me to talk through any issues that you might be having, any impacts that you're observing out in the corridor. We certainly want to continue those conversations and be responsive. So I want to thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate it. We appreciate the efforts that you put in, in communicating concerns and comments and questions to us. And please follow up if you have anything else to ask about. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, everybody. And we will talk to you all soon. Take care. Stay healthy, folks.